Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Pastor, etc. If we had more time, you'd have read my history. I'm the one who's standing in between these wonderful posters here, so you can have personal engagement with them, and also a light snack, dinner, whatever you call, outside about 5:30. So I'm going to talk about an epidemic, not that of COVID, but it's called as myopia. In other words, it's called nearsightedness. And so we're going to look at the prevalence, how do you control them, and is there a ways to prevent them? I also take this moment to thank our sponsor, symposium sponsor, Millennium, who work in the eye care industry, develop intraocular specialized lenses, and I need to declare that before coming to Weimar for 2 years, I was consultant for the company, and not anymore. So, myopia epidemic, does that look normal? It does look normal because we're used to, right? Does this look normal? On our way to GYC, we stopped by somewhere near Monterey Bay in the Hilton there after the breakfast, and I saw this, and I said, I told my daughter, Edith, and said, can you pose for a picture? And she smiled. Sorry about this, that the target of the picture wasn't you, but that kid behind on the table, as you can see how close that kid was, and that's how he was. He was staring at that monitor pretty close, and he was intensely involved in whatever he was viewing. And this is how the modern family looks like, right? There is this surrogate parenting going on, and sometimes this is how your classroom looks. There's absolutely disrespect for the faculty and their preparation, their expertise, and their time they put in standing in front of you, and then somebody is just playing basketball. Worse than that, probably, where is this picture taken? Probably is this a church, maybe our church, right? So the prevalence aspect is myopia is exploding around the globe, but the train is leaving the station as far as America is concerned. As you can see, the UN report predicts, based on data available from the last few decades, they're predicting by 2050, half the world's population will be myopic or short-sighted. And you can see that in America, 42% between the age of 12 and 54 are myopic, which is about 25% higher than it was 1970s. And it is also an economic burden. It will be about $200 billion by 2050. And who's going to bear that brunt? It's you and me. So 50%, yes, 50% of the world's population is expected to be myopic by 2050, but more importantly, 10% of them will be highly myopic by 2050. And that's even more dangerous. A high myopic is somebody who has a refractive power greater than 7 or 8 diopters. You can identify because their glasses are very thick. Reducing the rate of myopia progression by 50%. 50% could reduce the prevalence of high myopia by 90%. So the impact of myopia is not only financial, it also affects the quality of life and personal development. it lowers the score for the total quality of life. Okay, about educational outcomes, it impacts even in a sense like those 10% high myopic patients. The problem with that, or it's more dangerous in the sense that as they get older, they get diseases like macular degeneration, glaucoma, and retinal detachments. So it does affect the quality of life in many ways, like their social interactions. They lack confidence, and also they are not interested in talking to strangers. And these are all from the data collected studies. And you can see that they are emotionally also impacted. It limits their activities on a day-to-day basis, doing things, their hobbies, even driving daytime, more so during nighttime driving. And also they have what we call as unwanted phenomenons, as we see when people visualize starburst, the back of the eye, they see halo, certain light effects. So high myopia is a huge concern in the way that affects the quality of living. It's detrimental in diverse aspects. You can see that the activity limitation, economic well-being, emotional well-being, and also social well-being. It limits them. As your vision gets poor and deteriorates, your ability to explore various professions and various hobbies and day-to-day activities, even social aspects, are impacted. So let's classify myopia here. And the first, let me get my laser pointer here. As you can see, that's what we consider the normal eye, which we call as emetropic or emetropia. As you can see, light going through. If you're learning Mr. Peacock's class this semester, you would use the word like collimated light or parallel beam going into the eye would form a focused image on the back of the eye, retina. That's how that's how God designed. Okay, light going through, you're looking at a distant object, any distant object would form an image, inverted image on the retina, the back of the eye. But what happens in terms of myopia in an eye, when we call an eye myopia, is that you can see that the focused ray is not touching the back of the eye because the eye length has increased, or the eye has become a little larger in size. And it can keep on growing, and where you get the condition high myopia, where the power of the lens increases about -6 or even more than that. And it can, in some cases, that it can become pathologic and lead into various conditions, surgical procedures. So how does the eye grow? Okay, there's several hypotheses. The one that is I like, because it's to do with the light in the visual optics aspects. As you can see, the center one, the light focuses at the back of the eye, but sometimes the peripheral light, as you can see the red light here, focuses in front of the eye, telling the eye or demanding the eye come closer to the point of focus. On the other hand, the blue light coming on the peripheral light, as you can see, focuses beyond the retina or behind the screen, telling the retina to grow larger. So this hypothesis, what we call as hyperopic defocus, as you can see, where the eye growth increase in the power, refractive power or error happens. So the eye grows larger, but the focal point of the light is here. The image is here, but the screen is here, okay, in simpler terms. So the camera chip is here, but the image is focused here. Your smiling, beautiful smiling face is here, but the chip is further away from the point of focus. So there are several risk factors for myopia. One has been identified, what we call as school myopia. The kids today, especially in the Far Eastern or the East Asian countries, they go to school very early, like even the age before three years of age. They start their school very early. They spend more hours in reading and being in a confined classroom very early. They start very early in life, and so they're what we call as near work as early as 3. They are holding the book in front of them when the eye starts forming, right? They are growing. So the more you read and being in that confined space, you're actually saying the eye needs to grow more, okay? So the second aspect is use of computer and smartphones. I mean, I don't have to spend more time on that. The more you spend time on your smartphones, you're telling your eye, especially in an environment which is where you cause near work, which is what it is, a near work, because you're telling, you're making your demand, what you call as accommodative demand of the eye is to look very close, telling the eye to grow larger. The third aspect is parental myopia. We may think in terms of genetics, right? The parents pass it on to kids. But also that parents who are myopic tend to be highly educated people as well. So they pass on not just the gene, but also pass on that lifestyle of high education, or starting the education very early. There's also seasons of birth impact on the risk factor for myopia. If you're born in summer, you go to school in the fall, not in the same year, but 2-3 years later, when you're ready to go to school, like as soon as you turn 3, as soon as you turn 4, you go to school. Whereas somebody who's born in November and December, they get an extra 8 to 10 months before they get to go to school compared to the one who went to school during the summer. So the birth order contributes a little bit. The next one is the socioeconomic status. This is, in everything else, socioeconomic status is tend towards the poor, right? We always say poor families, economically downtrodden. But in myopia, it's a rich people's or developed country disease. Like it's socioeconomic status. The higher the socioeconomic status, people tend to get myopic more sooner. Or in that case. Genetics do play a role, but a lot of times people attribute to genetics is just very simplified reasoning. Here is the data from a combined study in the Australian group, Brian Holden, and you can see the data here spread out compared to the Gabons and the Eskimos, people in rural India, to Chile. As you can see, that keeps increasing to modern Western education, to that of the modern East Asian education, which is more demanding. You get into the school like 6:37 in the morning and you leave, and then you have tuitions up to 8, 9, 10 o'clock, and then you go to bed. So you can see that they stay in the near work confinements, the reading and near work in a confined space for a longer period of time. As you can see here, China, Beijing, Taiwan, Singapore, Seoul, all of them have higher, more than 90% of the population in those countries are myopic already. So they always looked at them. It's probably the East Asian genetics is the reason. So they looked at the twin study, the famous twin study, Singapore, is that one of the twin lived in Singapore. The second twin was growing up in Australia. The kid who grew up in Australia was emmetropic, or had normal eye, no refractive correction, versus the kid who grew up in Singapore in a different environment and ambience in a developed country had high myopia. For the same gene pool, twins. All right, so here are the major factors. As you can see, there are several aspects that were looked into, family characteristics, environment, and all those different aspects. The leading one is education and the time outdoors, with a strong and casual correlation. So what are the controls for myopia? It could be that how do you decrease myopia progression? That's called myopia control. And the other aspect is, can we even prevent myopia or the onset of myopia? And that's the important question that we want to ask. So one of the ways to control myopia, and as you know, that it's the second largest blindness in the world today, that people can have refractive corrections, they don't even know that they can be corrected. And so some of the ministries that Mr. Peacock did a few years ago to Cuba and other places are even significantly important as you go forward. So I'm to say that come back a few years from now, we may have an optometry school here, or find an optometry school where when you do your job, you have an instant satisfaction because somebody will see right away. You don't say, come back 6 months later. So spectacle correction, there are a couple of ways. One is progressive, the other one is bifocals. And the statistical, it's not very significant in terms of progressive, but the bifocals do, where we have the center ad power compared to the peripheral far distance correction. When you have central ad power, what does it mean? When you have a bifocal, you are corrected for the far distance, right? For your base correction. Then they add more diopter in the center so that you can read using that additional power. So here they also add a little bit of base and prism. I don't want to go into those reasons, but they found that about 60% of their vision get better in 3 years. So spectacle correction still a very promising one, but the part is that people would like to look better, right? So they start avoiding spectacle corrections. So the second aspect here is that where you would start to use contact lenses. The one they try is a few decades ago with the rigid gas permeable contact lenses. But they do not slow down the axial eye growth. Remember I said the emmetropic eye, the normal eye, is about 24 point something millimeters, whereas in myopia, that eye length, the axial length, keeps increasing. So the contact lens, which one is called as based on orthokeratology, where you wear them during the night, okay? When you wear them during the night and you go to sleep, and the design is that it shapes your cornea, the front part of the eye, in such a way that it allows for the eye growth or stabilizing the eye growth. There's also other contact lenses which are very famous. There are several products. I don't want to spend time on all of them. But you can see the one here, which we call as the carrot lens, designed recently, has high usability and also efficacy in terms of coverage. As you can see here, they have 25% larger treatment area, plus, as you can see, X3 more plus power elements, and it's more efficient in the myopia control with the data we have. And one of the important things is the ghosting effect. As I mentioned, some people, when they have this either spectacle correction or contact lens correction, or even sometimes intraocular lens correction, after their post-surgery or post these refraction corrections, they do experience different unwanted phenomena as they drive, nighttime phenomena, and when they read, they call the ghosting effects, when they see something that says dominant letter or object, but then also see a shadow. And here is more of the optical simulation thing where you look at the letter E, and for different defocus levels, I think this carrot lens have a better performance compared to other contact lenses. So this is slowing the myopia progression in different ways. All right, due to the time, let me move on. The other one is the pharmacological one, where you take a drop called atropine, which probably when you went to the optometrist and ophthalmologist, they have given to dilate your eye. But atropine is more than a dilator. It knocks down the accommodation. It freezes your lens accommodative capabilities, but also keeps your eye dilated for a long period of time. And so these drop, interestingly and accidentally they found, and several studies have proven, that helps slowing the myopia progression by 50% in children from the age 6 to 9. So which is a great thing. They take a drop and then go to bed, but they allows for slowing down of the myopic progression. The last one here, this is what is catching up in the last 5-6 years, has been the time spent outdoors. So in the Sydney myopia study, the exposure more than 2 hours of outdoor activity per day decreased the odds of myopia and centered the effect of near work. Okay? So interventions involving increasing time outdoors appear to reduce the onset of myopia. So the question here is not controlling myopia. How do you reduce the possibility of the onset of myopia in children? Because if you see that, the children, if your children gets myopic, as the person grows, the child grows into the adulthood, it may have the tendency to become highly myopic, right? The high myopia. The high myopia is the danger because as you age, you may get into some of the retinal conditions, including retinal detachment, macular degeneracy, and even glaucoma. So, and that's going to impact your quality of life in many ways, but also your professional growth. And the third aspect is the economic burden on the medical system. So, time outdoors. The underlying reasons why increased time spent outdoors is linked to a lower myopia incidence are some of the reasons here. High light intensities, okay? So we talk in terms of thousands of lux outside right now. Now even in this room, it's about 800 to 1,000 lux right here. And outside is probably 10,000 or no, about close to 90 or 100,000 outside. But I'll show you interesting data. That's the reason I mentioned here about the light intensity. There's a variation in chromatic light composition outside compared to inside where you have this lighting system. Okay, chromatic variabilities. Difference in dioptric topographies. When you walk outside, you have a tree, but there's a rock there, there's a building, there are different distances, dioptric demands. So your eye is not stressed too much when you stay inside a classroom reading the textbook or in your study table compared to when you're outdoors. The demand on your eye, accommodative ability, is less and less near work and a decrease in accommodative demand. So the total time spent outdoors appear to be an important factor rather than just playing outdoors. A lot of times you get out and play. So the studies have shown it's not about doing something, it's just being outside. And there's a study that reported the incidence of new cases of myopia over 1 year was significantly reduced by approximately 50% when the time spent outdoors were increased by how much? 80 minutes a day. So with that in mind, one of the ways that different countries, different governments are taking initiative in making their kids to slow down the onset of myopia. This is what they did in China a few years ago. You see that? In order to keep them from the near work, right? To keep them from near work, they put this iron grill around them so that they can stay away from the reading material. So a couple of years ago, we designed a study in collaboration with colleagues at Indiana University and in Spain, Murcia. We developed this study right before COVID, but then COVID hit. So you see that here is an app developed by the Spanish group where put in the tablet or in a cell phone. When a kid would bring that closer than 30 centimeters, that screen would turn dark. So it forces that kid to keep the tablet or the reading material at an arm's distance, which is at least 30 centimeters. So it's kind of developing a habit or making it a habitual thing. So this is a study done in the Kentucky College of Optometry, where you see that the myopia progression control, we use that app. I measured two things. One is that face and device distance. So I gave the students, these kids, tablets, okay, Amazon tablets, and they would take the tablet with them home, and they would use them through the day and night, but I would gather data remotely. The second thing I measured was their face illumination measurement, like from what is the ambience, the ambience, light levels in which they are using the tablet or they're playing with that technology. The kids involved were about 6 to 13 years old. As you can see, as I mentioned, I measured the illumination level of the ambience and also the near work aspects. So there are two groups. One is the intervention group. The other one is a non-intervention group. The non-intervention group is, they were given this tablet with this app, but the screen would not turn dark if they were to get that closer to their face. And the kids can use it here because they can. The accommodation can go up to 10, 12 diopters. So they can hold it. That's why kids can hold it. And as you get older and older, as you lose accommodation, your ability to read something will move away from you unless you're a myopic patient. Myopia is a blessing if you're getting older. When you get older, you get the condition called presbyopia, which is what I'm enjoying right now. I have to hold something like this, especially because I remained emetropic for all my life. But I think I probably am a borderline hyperope. So this distance keep increasing. Now I keep. That's why when you come to me, you give me something, I pretend because of VPA. So I pretend not reading because it's embarrassing, right? Holding like that. So I'll read it later. I'll get back to you. Okay? It's because of that. So the non-intervention group, the app would not turn the screen dark. And the intervention group, when the kid would bring any closer than 30 centimeters, the screen would turn dark, and then the kid is forced to move the screen away from that, from the eye or the face. So the data we had this is again the data from non-intervention group. That means the screen didn't turn on. We just took data from these kids. Is that more than 70% of the non-intervention group subjects had a working distance less than 33 centimeters. Okay? So they were using somewhere like this. So here is the percentage in the graph. The red and this orange, about 72% here, times they were holding it closer than the 33 centimeter distance, reasonable distance. And what was the illumination level? Those are the two things I was measuring, right? How near they were keeping from their face or eyes. And the second one is the ambience light. I don't know where these kids were holding the tablet or what they were watching. Probably they were under the bed or inside a closet. I don't know. But look at this. 87% of the time, the non-intervention group subjects work in an illumination level under what? 100 lux. 100 lux, probably I need to turn all of these lights. Okay? So they were not in a better illumination. Remember I mentioned time outdoors because of the sunlight and the different chromatic dioptrics, all of that. So you can see that the lowest average illumination for one subject found to be about 12 lux, was completely dark. So the other aspect, as you can see here, I'm comparing the data here. The blue is the non-intervention group. The orange is the intervention group. As you can see, 0 to 25 centimeters, the non-intervention group, 30% of them were using that. And about 26 to 33 centimeters, again, 40% of them were holding it like that. But the intervention group, as you can see, because they were habitually trained to hold the laptop or the tablet greater than 33 centimeters, you can see that 81% of them were in that region. The others were trying to do that, but the screen would turn dark, so they couldn't use that. Okay? Probably it's a useful technology going forward to, not all the time you can keep the technology away from kids, but it could be a good habitual training to do them. And you also see that the accommodative demand on the people who didn't have the restriction were higher to about 3 diopters compared to that of 2 diopters for the people who were in the intervention group. But more important here is that in the study, which ranged from 3 to 4 months, between 3 to 4 months, and they were there for about 5 to 7 visits where we measured subjectively and objectively their refractive power and the axial lens. As you can see here, the blue was the first measurement, and the orange line was their last measurement, which was about the 7th visit. In the last 3 to 4 months, you can see that the orange line is above the blue line, which is their axial length. The eye has grown a little larger for the non-intervention group, in about 0.38 millimeters in that 3 to 4 months in the usage of the technology. So the remote monitoring of the children for this 3 months shown clearly that if in the natural habitation, if you give them phone or these tablets, the kids are going to use them pretty close, which is going to harm or cause myopia and the eye growth. Ambient light was found to be less than 100 lux in both the groups, whether it's non-intervention or intervention group, and we need a long-term study than 3 months. But I'm here in Weimar. We're going to start that study again. Here is the council. All right, we had a couple of talks on New Start. It brings us back to this New Start principles. Okay, parenting or a kid growing up following this New Start principle would not have to worry about this myopic progression in that case. So the parent may take their children outdoors to view God in nature. They can be pointed to the blooming flowers and the opening buds and the lofty trees and the beautiful spires of grass and taught that God made all these in 6 days and rested on the 7th day and hallowed it. And there are many more counsels like this. We can go on, but time restricts me to do that. But here is the New Start principle that we have. A kid spending time outdoors with enough light, ambient light, and also less and less near work. Okay, it's not that the kid shouldn't read anything, but the kid should spend enough time. But there has to be a balance of spending time with a book, with literatures, near work, and also time outdoors, where there is no accommodative demand as much as in a confined classroom. And that's what they have found. Repeated studies, especially in countries like Singapore and Japan, where the classrooms are small, confined, sometimes not even window, and the lighting conditions are confined. They are manipulated light, color temperature, and the wavelengths are all manipulated in a sense that allowing the eye, telling the eye to grow larger. And we may be genetically prone as other things in other aspects. We may be genetically prone, but we don't have to turn on the switch if we only follow the New Start principles. Thank you.
You have a question for Dr. Martin? Oh yes, many questions.
So you mentioned the cure. One cure is retraining the eye with corrective lenses, and then they also had the smaller ones that you put inside of your eye. I'm sorry, it's slipping my mind. And then there's also the contacts, and then there's also the app that they developed. Is there anything else that's used? Surgery? What else?
For what? For controlling myopia?
Yeah,
for correcting? So there are different things. Like correcting myopia is different from what the results we're looking at, preventing myopia. Preventing the onset of myopia. And the study was about how do you prevent the onset of myopia in children so that they don't have to get into this myopia, high myopia, and which affects their life in many ways. But more importantly, that this is growing. Like 20 years ago in America, there were about 15 to 20% myopic patients. Now we have 42, and by 2050, we'll cross 50%. Globally, 50% would be myopic. So correcting myopia is either through spectacle correction, through contact lens correction, and in some cases, it could be if you're keratoconus, in other words, if your front part of the cornea, front part, if you put your finger, if you don't do that, but if your finger touches, that's cornea, right? That sometimes could be very uneven. It's called a keratoconic condition, and so that needs a little bit different orthokeratology corrections.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an age where this subsides or slows down? Like, is there an age? Nowadays, we have people who don't give their kids things to look at, screens and those types of things. But is there an age where it slows down and we can say at age 3, 4, 5, you can give them?
No, not really, because the eye, as it forms, it's not fully developed when you're born. The eye, any newly born kid is more hyperopic, and the eye starts forming. It's still in the formative period. It gets better. When it's fully formed, that's when now 2-year kids are having phones, right? That's the surrogate parenting right now. Right, whether home or in church or in the car. Otherwise, the kid continuously shouts, "Are we there yet?" Right? When you're driving, so they give them a phone, and so the point here is this: it's the stimulus. Eye responds to the stimulus. If your stimuli is to tell the eye you need to grow, it'll grow. So it doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter. So that's where, when you're young, when you're a kid, you become myopic, and if it develops into high myopia, in the case that you're not correcting for it, compensating for it, when it gets high myopic, then you will be in a problem. It will be a huge trouble. And East Asia and the governments there are facing a huge problem, because if you go to China, Singapore, and all of that, people, all of them are wearing some correction. These days, it's more contact lens. Then spectacle correction. But what the problem is, when they get into 40, 50, 60 years, they're going to go into a lot of this retinal condition, and it's going to affect the quality of life. A lot of cases, surgical procedures.
All right, so my question has to do with what you just said. So if myopia in childhood results in increased risk for all of these retinal conditions in older age, how does that connect with the age-related corrections that happen when you end up with like presbyopia?
Yeah, that's different, because so myopia is different. The question is a good question, but it's different than what we are talking here. Our eye lens, right? The eye has two optics. One is the cornea, the front area, and then behind that is the aqueous humor, and then right after that's a crystalline lens. And the beauty of the crystalline lens, when you're young, like all of your eyes, that it can change shape based on the demand, whether it's a near focus or a far point. It'll change its shape to, put that object or the image in focus. But as you get older and older, you lose the ability to accommodate. The accommodative ability increases as you go into your teenage years, and then it starts decreasing. So it's more like a V curve, okay? Or I should say an inverted U curve, okay? And so when you get into 35, it starts to drop, 40, 45. By 50, if you celebrated 2 weeks ago, it's just bad news. Like your accommodation is frozen. At this point, your lens is, like if you're a teenager, the lens changes shape like this, but it keeps reducing. And as you get 50, 60, it's not moving much. And about 60, it's pretty much there is no accommodation. That condition is called presbyopia, okay? That condition is called presbyopic. So anybody 55, 60, they are presbyopic. Pretty much there is no accommodation. There'll be probably some residual movement, because what they have found is, even though the crystalline lens is a frozen pizza there, frozen disc there, the muscles that are attached to the ciliary muscles and the strings that are attached to that crystalline lens is still pulling and pushing, as though you were still 20 years old. So even though with age, your lens gets frozen, not the muscle. So you may have some residual effect, even though you're presbyopic. But if you're presbyopic and myopic, it's a blessing. You can see close. Dr. Itzara can see everything closely. Okay, if you're an emmetrope and presbyopic, then it is a little bit more worse. But if you're a presbyope, that means, when I use the word presbyope, it's that you're old and your lenses doesn't change shape. And you're hyperope, it's a double curse. because your far point moves far away and your near point has moved far away.
So what you're saying is that the eye will continue to grow. It's the lengthening of the eye that causes the problem. And because presbyopia only has to do with the lens becoming more rigid, it doesn't protect the eye from retinal detachment or any of the other complications of high myopia in old age.
Yeah, because your eye is, so it's not that you're going to be high myopic when you're 60 when the lens is frozen or loses all the accommodation. You become high myopic probably very early, in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, when the accommodation was still there, and you become high myopic.
Right. So presbyopia has nothing to do with helping the risk factor of myopia in early childhood.
No, yeah. It's a good question, though.
Dr. Celestine and I would like to tell you that we just got our eyes checked separately. We weren't together. But our eyes are improving slightly. Why is that?
Are you myopes, like myopic, nearsighted? Is your lens power negative?
Yeah.
That's what I said. If you're myopic and you're getting older, it's because your near point gets nearer. It's a blessing. It's a blessing in disguise.
All right, can we take just one more question or more?
I can, but yeah, well, one more question.
What did the intervention group look like?
That's a good question. The intervention group had, I think I don't have that data here, but the intervention group wasn't this larger number. It wasn't 0.3 millimeters.
So it was less.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.